If you never rise above the noise, you'll spend your life reacting to things that were never worth your focus in the first place. And for a lot of people, that's exactly what life starts to feel like. You wake up already behind. You carry yesterday's stress into today. You answer the urgent message, handle the next problem, put out the next fire, and by the end of the day, you're exhausted, but not always sure you move toward anything that truly matters. That's not just a productivity problem, it's a perspective problem. Because when you live too close to the noise, you lose sight of the life God is actually calling you to build.
Welcome to the Rebellious Remedy. I'm Jonathan Ennis, founder of Dream Root Wellness. Here we return to Christ as the foundation of true health, body, mind, heart, and spirit, so we can steward our lives in faithful obedience to God's design. If you're ready to walk this out with others, you're invited to join the Dream Root Wellness Network. Join today at community.dreamrootwellness.com.
Welcome back. Today, we're continuing our exploration of the tree of wellness. We've talked about the roots, we've talked about the trunk, we've talked about the branches. We've kept it all rooted in the fertile soil of Jesus Christ. Now we come to the sky, and the sky matters because it reminds us of something most people forget. You weren't made to live stuck in the weeds. You weren't made to spend your whole life buried in reaction mode, buried in urgency, buried in distraction, buried in whatever problem is screaming the loudest today. God created you with vision. He created you with purpose. He created you with the ability to step back, look up, and see beyond the chaos of the moment. But the enemy wants the opposite. He wants you locked into the immediate, focused on what's loud instead of what lasts, chasing urgency instead of eternity, confusing motion with progress, busyness with fruitfulness, activity with obedience. And that's how people lose years, not always because they're doing nothing, but because they're staying busy doing the things that don't matter most. Colossians chapter 3, verse 2 says, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." That's the invitation. Look up, not in a vague, sentimental way, in a disciplined way, in a strategic way, in a way that changes how you live. Because when you adopt a sky-level perspective, you stop reacting and start building. You start to use the three components of the sky concept. You start planning, assessing, reflecting. You stop living by impulse. You stop drifting with the current. You stop getting pulled around by every distraction, every emotion, every demand, and every short-term pressure. You start living on purpose. And that shift matters deeply, not only for your own peace and direction, but also for the kind of life, health, and impact you're able to cultivate over time. That's one of the reasons the Dream Root Wellness Network exists, to help people stop living fragmented, reactive lives and begin growing with intention, spiritually, personally, and practically, inside a community that's committed to whole person wellness and meaningful transformation. So the sky represents perspective. It represents the ability to rise above the clutter and see the bigger picture. And without that perspective, people drift. That's what happens. They become reactive. They get buried in daily demands. They stay focused on what's urgent instead of what's important. They spend all their time putting out fires and almost no time asking why the fires keep starting in the first place. That kind of life can feel productive for a while, but it usually isn't, because movement isn't the same thing as direction, and activity isn't the same thing as alignment. A lot of people are exhausted, not because they've been faithful, but because they've been scattered. They've said yes to too much. They've thought too little. They've reflected too rarely. They've never stopped long enough to ask, where am I going? Why am I going there? What am I building? And is my daily life actually moving me toward it? That's what the sky forces you to confront. It gives you room to zoom out. And that matters because when you can't zoom out, You start living as if today is all there is. We've talked about this concept of the 24-hour biblical life. Jesus calls us in Matthew chapter 6, verse 34, to not worry about tomorrow, for today has enough trouble on its own. And that means you have to have focused effort on what you're accomplishing today. But that doesn't mean we don't need to have vision for the future. In fact, the vision guides you, but the daily practices are what move you closer to that vision. So don't make the mistake a lot of people make, and that's to keep pushing forward without knowing where you're going. Because when that happens, you make shallow decisions. You trade long-term purpose for short-term relief. You trade calling for comfort. You trade legacy for convenience. That's why this perspective matters. There are some things you can't see clearly from ground level. When you're too close to the noise, everything feels equally important. Every demand feels urgent. Every emotion feels final. Every distraction feels justified. Every interruption feels like it deserves your full attention. But when you step back, things change. What felt urgent starts to look smaller. What felt overwhelming starts to make more sense. What felt confusing starts to come into focus. That's what perspective does. And that's why people who never step back keep repeating the same mistakes over and over. They don't pause long enough to see the pattern. They don't assess what's working. They don't reflect on what's failing. They don't make intentional adjustments. They just keep pushing. And then they wonder why life never feels clearer. Because clarity doesn't usually come while you're sprinting. It often comes when you stop long enough to look up. This is also why isolated growth tends to stall. On your own, it's easy to normalize the noise. It's easy to call survival just a busy season. It's easy to keep repeating what's draining you because no one is helping you step back and see what's become invisible from ground level. The Dream Root Wellness Network is designed to interrupt that cycle. It creates space for people who want more than scattered self-improvement, people who want support, reflection, encouragement, and practical guidance as they build healthier rhythms and a more intentional life. The enemy loves keeping people trapped at ground level. Why? Because ground level living is reactive living, and reactive people are easier to derail. If he can keep you busy enough, you won't reflect. If he can keep you distracted enough, you won't plan. If he can keep you rushed enough, you won't assess. If he can keep you emotionally stirred up enough, you won't think clearly about where your life is headed. You stay tired, you stay distracted, you stay reactive. And because you never rise above it, you never ask the deeper questions. So the sky is a reminder. Look higher, think longer, plan better, reflect honestly. Because if you don't, the noise will decide your life for you. So what does this higher view actually give you? 3 things. It helps you plan, it helps you assess, it helps you reflect. These 3 practices are what the sky represents. So let's dive a bit deeper into each right now. Number 1, plan. Planning is how you stop living randomly. It's how you stop waking up every day hoping things somehow move in the right direction without any sort of intention. You ask, where am I going? Why does it matter? What kind of life am I actually trying to build? What habits would support that? What habits are taking me in the wrong direction? A lot of people say they want change, but they never plan for it. They say they want peace, but they keep living chaotically. They say they want growth, but they keep living aimlessly. They say they want fruit, but they never cultivate anything on purpose. That's why planning matters. It turns vague desire into deliberate action. And when people join in a growth-centered community, planning becomes easier to practice consistently. You're no longer relying on only motivation that fades. You have reminders, structure, and a shared culture that keeps bringing you back to what matters. Number 2, assess. Because a plan means nothing if you never stop to check whether it's working. Assessment asks, what is actually producing fruit right now? What's draining me? What's distracting me? What's helping me move forward? What's slowing me down? What needs to be pruned? This is where honesty matters, integrity, the first root of wellness, because a lot of people stay loyal to patterns that are clearly not serving them. They keep defending habits that weaken them. They keep tolerating distractions that rob them. They keep spending energy on things that don't actually matter. Assessment helps cut through that. It forces you to look at reality instead of living off assumptions. That's another reason supportive environments matter. Honest assessment is hard when you're isolated. It becomes easier when you're in a space that normalizes reflection, course correction, and growing without shame. And that brings us to number 3, reflect. Reflection is where you make sense of what you're learning. It's where you ask, what happened here? Why did that go well? Why did it fall apart? What was God teaching me? What needs to change moving forward? Without reflection, people repeat patterns they should have already learned from. They keep making the same mistakes because they never sit still long enough to process them. Reflection slows you down in the right way, not to paralyze you, to sharpen you. And often that sharpening happens best when wisdom is shared in community, when someone else's insights help you name what you've been feeling, and when your own journey becomes encouragement for someone else. This whole lesson is really about one thing: stop drifting. That's the danger, because drift rarely feels dramatic. It usually feels normal. And if you don't have a regular way to rise above your life and look at it honestly, you won't catch the drift until you're far off course. That's why regular check-ins matter. Not because you need a perfect life management system, because you need a way to stay awake, a way to stop and ask, am I aligned with my calling, or am I just staying busy? That question alone can cut through a lot of nonsense. And for many people, the next right step isn't simply trying harder alone. It's choosing a healthier environment, one that helps them keep returning to clarity, purpose, and whole person growth when life tries to pull them back into reaction mode. The sky also reminds you to think beyond today, not because today doesn't matter, it does, but today isn't all there is. Your decisions ripple forward and outward. Your habits, routines, and compromises, and even your faithfulness are building something. The question is, what are they building? What kind of legacy is your life creating? What kind of person are your daily habits forming? What story are your decisions telling? A person with no sky-level perspective lives trapped in the immediate. A person with vision lives with eternity in mind. That changes things. It changes what you say yes to. It changes what you tolerate. It changes what you cut out. It changes how you spend your time. It changes what you call success. Because once eternity matters, not everything gets equal weight anymore. Now, having vision doesn't mean life will go exactly according to your plan. It won't. Storms come, schedules change, seasons shift, hardship interrupts, doors open and close. That's real life. But that doesn't mean you stop living with direction. It means you stay flexible without becoming aimless. That's important because some people here be flexible and turn it into drifting. Others here have a plan and turn it into rigid control. Neither is right. The sky teaches a better way. Stay focused on your direction. Stay anchored in truth, but stay humble enough to adapt when needed, because your anchor should stay steady even when your circumstances change. So here's what I expect from you this week. Rise above the chaos. The enemy wants you grounded in the wrong way, tied down by fear, tied down by urgency, by distraction, tied down by the endless demands of daily life. But you were made to live with vision, to see further, to move wiser, to think more clearly, to live more deliberately. The sky reminds you to look up, to stop staring only at what's right in front of you, to remember there's a bigger story being written than whatever is demanding your attention today. That's where peace comes from. That's where direction comes from. That's where steadiness comes from. Not from doing more, from seeing better, and from being rooted in Jesus. And if this lesson is resonating because you know you've been living too close to the noise, too reactive, too scattered, too disconnected from the deeper life you feel called to build, then the Dream Root Wellness Network may be the kind of place you've been needing. It's for people who don't just want inspiration for a moment. They want support for a process. They want to cultivate healthier roots, clearer direction, stronger rhythms, and a life that reflects the purpose God has placed within them. Here's a practical assignment. This week, create one intentional check-in time. Not someday, actually schedule it. Take 20 to 30 minutes to step back from the noise. Then ask yourself, where am I going right now? Why does it matter? What is helping me move in the right direction? What's stealing my focus or energy? What needs to be strengthened? What needs to be pruned? Am I aligned with my calling, or am I just staying busy? Then write down one thing you need to keep doing, one thing you need to change, and one thing you need to cut out. That's enough. Don't make it complicated. The point isn't to build some elaborate system. The point is to rise above the weeds long enough to see clearly again. And as you do, pay attention to what becomes obvious. Sometimes the next step is a habit change. Sometimes it's a boundary. Sometimes it's a conversation. And sometimes it's recognizing that you need a community that'll help you keep choosing growth long after the emotion of one powerful lesson fades. If you're tired of living in reaction mode, if you're craving deeper alignment between faith, your choices, and everyday life, if you know you need more than another burst of motivation, you need a place to keep growing intentionally. Consider joining the Dream Root Wellness Network. This is a space for people who want to build from the roots up with greater clarity, healthier patterns, stronger reflection, and a more purposeful way of life. You don't have to keep navigating the noise alone. You can step into a community that helps you slow down, see clearly, and keep moving toward the life God is calling you to cultivate. Next week, we're diving deeper into planning, because seeing the bigger picture isn't enough. You also need to know how to move with purpose. So next session, we'll break down how to plan clearly, practically, and faithfully. Then after that, we'll come back and give assessing and reflecting their own dedicated sessions too. Because vision matters, but so does execution, and so does honest evaluation. Let the sky remind you, you are not made to live buried in noise. You were made to live with vision, with purpose, perspective, intention. So look up, plan, assess, reflect, stop reacting, and start building. Because when you live with a sky-level perspective, you stop wasting your life on what's loud, and you start giving it what lasts.